Hey guys, tonight we're traveling to a place that's so hot, even your thoughts sweat. You're somewhere in ancient Persia, in the heart of the desert, just as the sun dips low and the sand starts pretending it wasn't a literal frying pan all day. Your robes stick to your back, your sandals squish with melted wax, and every breeze feels like a hairdryer set to wrath of the gods. And yet, someone, somewhere, is about to serve you a bowl of snow-drenched rosewater pudding with crushed pistachios on top. Yes, you're in a world where ancient engineers figured out how to refrigerate dessert without electricity, without compressors, and with a temperature hovering just shy of melt your eyeballs. You're also very likely not going to survive long in this setting unless you're into camel blisters and sand in your kidneys. But don't worry. You're just here to relax. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, let me know your location and the time you're tuning in. I love seeing the Sleep Squad around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey. Together, you trudge across the dusty plains of ancient Persia, following the scent of something sweet, honey, rose, maybe a hint of chilled apricot. The air is thick with heat, yet somehow there's the unmistakable cool breath of ice lurking just beneath the surface of the city. This is no hallucination. You're nearing a yakhchāl, a mysterious mud-brick dome half sunk into the earth, like a sunburnt igloo, and it holds something miraculous inside. Ice. It's 500 BCE, give or take a few debate-heavy scrolls. The Achaemenid Empire stretches from the Indus Valley to the Aegean Sea, and amid all the gold, conquests and elaborate beards, a quieter innovation hums in the background: desert refrigeration. You're not royalty, not tonight, but your presence near the yakhchāl earns you a curious nod from the guards. These men are sweating through silk tunics, but they still watch over this structure like it's the Empire's final line of defense. And in a way, it is. Inside lies not just ice, but status, sustenance, medicine, and peace of mind, especially when it's 110 degrees outside. Step closer. You hear a muffled drip, a faint echo from within, like the structure itself is sighing. The yakhchāl's walls are thick, sometimes up to 2 meters, made from a special blend of mud, lime, sand, goat hair, and ash called sarooj. They repel. Heat like a paranoid recluse. It's not the material alone that keeps things frosty, it's geometry. Sloping cones deflect the sun, and a sunken pit below traps cold air like a nervous hamster in a wind tunnel. Historians still argue whether the very first yakhchāl was purely functional storage or also a royal showpiece. Some think early versions were only for ice, others insist they doubled as walk-in freezers for rose-scented sorbet. But no one disputes their genius. Even the Greeks, who like to think they invented everything, wrote admiringly of the Persians' ability to conjure cold in a place where rivers boiled dry. Inside one such yakhchāl, you step gingerly onto stone, stairs spiraling down into semi-darkness. The air turns noticeably cooler with each breath, your skin prickling with delight. It smells like moss, old clay, and something floral. Your fingers brush the sides, smooth in places, pebbled in others. A puddle glistens under your sandal, recent melt. In a far corner, stacked in neatly cut blocks, is the prize, ice harvested from mountain streams and winter night frosts, stored here like ancient treasure. Nearby sits a wooden tray, slightly warped but lovingly maintained. On it, a shallow bowl of faluda, noodles made from cornstarch, soaked in syrup, laced with lime juice and chilled into near slush. You slurp a spoonful. It tastes like a poem whispering in your mouth. Sweet, tart, cold, and perfumed with history. Your teeth ache, but your soul exhales. This is where your journey begins, not with war, not with kings, but with a desert in the desert, and with a people who decided somewhere between inventing cuneiform receipts and elephant armor that staying cool wasn't just for comfort, it was a cultural flex. Ice wasn't merely for eating, it was for ceremonies, healing rituals, and sometimes even religious offerings. You lean back against the cool stone, letting your thoughts melt. How did they keep this place so cold? Who carried the ice? What secrets lie under the city's dusty roads, connecting these ancient fridges to streams and mountain shadows? Outside, the moon rises like a pearl in a bowl of black honey. The desert cools, the yakhchāl hums, and you're just getting started.
You wake, or rather continue your drowsy descent, at the edge of another yakhchāl. This one's older, cracked in places but still noble in form. You're here to understand its bones. Because you can't appreciate Persian frozen desserts without first admiring the freezer. And in this case, the freezer is a 20-foot-tall, sun-fighting, physics-defying dome that looks like something a sandworm might use for a vacation home. You squint at the structure in daylight. Its shape is no accident. The yakhchāl's dome isn't. Just for drama. It's designed to reduce thermal conduction. The conical form minimizes surface area exposed to the sun, while the interior stays blessedly shadowed all day. You step closer and notice the mud brick lattice spiraling toward the top, ventilation slits that help hot air escape. Basically, the structure sighs out its heat like a tired librarian. Historians still argue whether the design came from Babylonian prototypes or was purely Persian ingenuity. Some say these domes evolved from grain silos. Others think they're the architectural love child of mountain caves and very determined dessert lovers. What they all agree on, though, is that these weren't accidental. They were feats of thermodynamic mastery. You run a hand across the surface, rough, fibrous, warm. This is sarooj, the ancient supermortar. It's hydrophobic, meaning water beads off instead of soaking in. Made from clay, lime, ash, sand, egg whites, goat hair, and sometimes the crushed bones of your enemies, kidding mostly, it was engineered to last. Sarooj doesn't just resist moisture, it also resists regret. The oldest yakhchāls still standing have walls thicker than your average SUV and more insulation than a 1980s ski lodge. Beneath the dome, there's always a pit. Not for bodies, unless your sleep-deprived brain drifts that way, but for ice. This basin is often sunk a few meters below ground level to trap cooler air. It's like nature's fridge drawer, only instead of wilted spinach and ancient mustard packets, you get glistening snow blocks. Now step back a bit. Look around. A trench runs along the outer edge. It's not decorative. That shallow channel once carried water diverted from nearby qanats. Those underground aqueducts the Persians built like mole people with engineering degrees. During frigid desert nights, water would flow into open-air pools beside the yakhchāl and freeze. At dawn, the frozen slabs were broken, hauled inside, and stacked like chocolate bars in a very, very slow candy shop. The most elite yakhchāls included dual-layer chambers, a kind of thermal vestibule to prevent sudden hot air intrusions. Of like an airlock, but for sorbet. And speaking of sorbet, you remember the bowl of falude from earlier? It's still echoing pleasantly in your memory. That icy sweetness, made possible by this intricate building, this 6th century HVAC system made of dirt and hope. From a distance, yakhchāls often looked like oversized termite mounds or failed attempts at space capsules. Yet inside, they were sacred spaces, cool, dark, humming with the whisper of meltwater. They kept not just desserts, but also butter, meats, medicines, and sometimes bodies meant for delayed burial. Ancient Persia, where cold storage really meant something. Now picture this. You're an architect in 520 BCE, and the local governor wants a new yakhchāl, but he wants it better, cooler, bigger, flashier. So you argue with mud brick suppliers, test lime ratios, chase after goats for their hair, and sketch airflow models with a stick in the sand while your assistants argue about wind direction. One wrong angle and the whole thing becomes a sweat lodge instead of an ice box. And the kicker? You don't get a statue for your troubles, just maybe a small plaque, or a brief mention in a trader's journal complaining about the smell of wet goat. Still, the pride's real, because every time a nobleman slurps chilled honey snow from a carved bowl, you made that moment possible. Every time someone survives a fever with the help of a snow-packed compress, that's on you. Every time an insomniac like you drifts off thinking about frozen desserts beneath a desert moon. Also on you. You step away from the dome, shaded now by the lengthening afternoon light. A breeze brushes past, warm but respectful. The yakhchāl. Behind you sits steady and timeless. And you can't help but feel a little cooler just knowing it's there. You wake from your soft haze just as the temperature drops a notch, an almost imperceptible shift, like the desert itself is taking a breath. Now you're about to meet the unsung heroes of the Persian desert operation, the ice harvesters. The quiet, frost-bitten badasses who literally climbed mountains just so someone else could have a more elegant summer. You shuffle along a caravan trail outside an ancient village, the kind where the donkeys look older than the houses and the smell of cumin and damp wool lingers in the morning air. Up ahead, you see a procession of men winding their way down from the hills. Some are barefoot. Most are wearing layered woolen cloaks despite the encroaching heat. They're hauling large canvas-wrapped bundles on their backs and atop mules, ice, freshly cut and tightly packed with straw and sawdust. If you're imagining glacial elegance or some kind of magical sleigh team, let's adjust the image. This was hard, bruising work. Ice was collected during the coldest hours of the night, often from shallow pools specifically designed to freeze quickly. These pools, open-air basins carved into the ground beside yakhchāls, would fill via aqueducts and freeze over during the frigid Persian nights. The thicker the ice, the more celebratory the morning. The harvesters used stone tools, or sometimes serrated copper blades, to chip away at the slabs. They'd load the ice into leather or woven, reed baskets, then wrap it in layers of straw to preserve it from melting during transit. And while they weren't exactly riding off into a Disney montage, they were participating in one of the earliest supply chains in refrigeration history. Historians still argue whether ice gathering was a specialized profession or simply rotated among villagers. Some scrolls suggest full-time ice carriers existed and were even exempt from certain taxes. Others believe it was communal labor, done in shifts by folks who really just wanted their faluda to not taste like warm regret. Either way, these people understood one thing clearly. Cold didn't last long unless you worked for it. You pass a small encampment where a team of harvesters is resting. They drink hot tea, yes, hot because desert physics are confusing, and chew dried dates under a makeshift canopy. One man massages his fingers, stiff from the pre-dawn chill. Another chuckles about how his mule slipped on the ice, nearly becoming dessert himself. You laugh with them, a soft hum in the quiet morning. The journey from mountain to yakhchāl is perilous. On foot, in the dark, through sand, rock, and uneven goat paths, every slab of ice is a race against the sun. Some donkeys don't make it. Some ice melts en route, dripping into the earth like a quiet insult. But still, they walk. For the love of ritual, for the coin from a royal kitchen, or simply because chilled rosewater syrup is a non-negotiable part of Persian dignity. You imagine one of these carriers years from now bragging to a grandson. When I was your age, I walked 40 kilometers with an ice block on my back and no GPS. And the grandson nods, while secretly dreaming of just inventing the freezer already. You pass another group setting off for the next harvest. Their faces are calm, already half lost in the rhythm of the path. Some sing under their breath, low, repetitive songs that match the clip-clop of hooves and the rustle of straw. It's almost meditative, like a very dry, ancient ASMR track. 1. Elderly harvester stops near you, lifts the edge of a tarp, and reveals a perfectly cut block of ice, already sweating under the morning sun. He smiles and says something you don't catch, perhaps a blessing or just a tired joke. You smile back. It's a moment frozen in time, quite literally. As the caravan moves on, you feel the softest breeze against your skin. It smells like crushed mint and snow. You follow the breeze, drifting down a quiet alley between adobe homes until it funnels you toward something odd in the middle of the desert. Winter. Not snowflakes or icicles exactly, but a subtle engineered winter. A manufactured chill that lingers around the yakhchāl and seems to grow as you move closer. You've arrived at one of the more mind-bending features of Persian architecture, how entire neighborhoods could mimic cold climates without so much as a refrigerator magnet. To understand this, you have to look up, way up. That's where the bajirs, wind catchers, come into play. These towering chimneys dot rooftops and yakhchāl edges like giant weather vanes designed by introverts. Their job? To coax passing breezes down into the buildings like shy guests at a poetry reading. Bajirs work on a simple premise. Hot air rises, cool air falls, and a well-placed architectural funnel can redirect both like a stage director in a toga. As wind enters the tower, it's funneled downward, passing over water basins or ice pits inside the structure, chilling as it flows. It exits out another vent, pulling warm indoor air up and out. Congratulations, you've just walked into an ancient version of air conditioning, with no carbon footprint unless you count the goats. Historians still argue whether bajirs originated in Persia or were borrowed and improved from Egyptian or Mesopotamian designs. Some inscriptions suggest independent development in the Yazd region, where summer temperatures regularly flirted with 40 degrees Celsius. Others point to trade links and shared blueprints across ancient cultures with a shared distaste for sweating through their tunics. Tonight, though you're focused on Yazd, you stand beneath a particularly intricate wind catcher, its multiple channels splitting breezes like a lazy DJ remixing the air. Below it, a narrow corridor leads into a home partially sunk into the ground. Another, way to simulate cooler environments. You duck inside and feel the temperature drop like a whisper slipping off your shoulders. The walls are thick. The floor is packed clay. In the corner, a bowl of something frosty glistens. Faluda again? Or maybe saffron snow custard. You never thought you'd get to be picky about ancient desserts. But here you are. You stretch out on a low divan, half listening to the soft gurgle of a fountain built into the wall. That's no mere decoration. It's part of the cooling system. 2. Water channels, or conquests, run beneath the floor, drawing icy flow from distant mountains and guiding it, with absurd patience, to homes and yakhchāls and even public gardens. You sip from a cup of something floral, likely sorbet, chilled and scented with mint. The glass is slick with condensation, a small miracle in this parched land. The ceiling arches above you in careful curves, shaped to coax air movement like a dance between shadow and breeze. Outside, life moves more slowly in this man-made winter. Merchants fan themselves under date palms. Children chase each other with snowballs pulled from storage pits. A cat sprawls on a stone windowsill, seemingly unbothered by thermodynamics. You peek into a back courtyard. There, beside the pomegranate trees, sits another ice pit, smaller, but still lined with stone and straw. A woman carefully lowers a clay pot into it, her hands steady. Perhaps it holds milk, or medicinal herbs, or a favorite sherbet recipe handed down like sacred scripture. You think about how much of this system depends not just on architecture, but on rhythm, daily routines, nightly temperature drops, seasonal harvesting. This is winter without winter, an engineered silence, a curated chill. And you're right, in the middle of it, slowly melting into the cushion, lulled by air older than memory. You stir slightly as the scent of something indulgent drifts into your dreams. It's floral, a little nutty, with a sugary warmth that almost masks the chill around you. You open your eyes, or rather, gently pry your mind open, and find yourself sitting cross-legged in a stone courtyard behind a Persian noble's home. It's mid-morning, and already the sun is campaigning for its title as most aggressive celestial body. But you're in the shade, beneath a lattice canopy, watching servants prepare what can only be described as royal-grade desserts. This is where cold becomes culture, because while ice was practical, preserving milk, soothing fevers, it was, also more importantly, delicious. Ancient Persia didn't just store snow, it celebrated it. You watch a servant gently scrape flakes off a compacted snow block into a copper bowl. He adds rose water, honey, and a little grated melon, then sprinkles the top with slivered almonds and crushed saffron. The result is sharbat barf, literally snow drink, and it looks like something that could end a war. You taste a spoonful. It's floral, smooth, just sweet enough to make your shoulders drop a few extra inches. This isn't a casual snack. This is a ceremony in a bowl. Across the courtyard, more dishes are being prepared. There's faluda, those delicate rice, or cornstarch noodles tangled in syrup and chilled until just shy of solid. Next to it, a creamy orange blossom concoction layered with crushed ice and hints of sour cherry. You think you see someone zesting a lime with a knife longer than your forearm? Historians still argue over which of these treats appeared first. Some say faluda dates back to around 400 BCE. Others claim it was introduced much later, adapted from Indian or Chinese noodle traditions. There's even debate over whether some cold desserts were metaphorical in older texts, like when a poet says, "Love is sweet and chilled like crushed snow under saffron fingers." Is that literal, or are they just being poetic drama? Queens again? The kitchen staff, mostly women, move with focused grace. You note their headscarves tied tightly, sleeves rolled high, and arms dusted with powdered sugar and flour. One of them laughs softly as she adjusts a wooden paddle over a basin of iced syrup, turning it slowly until it thickens to the perfect slush. You watch in admiration and maybe mild hunger. This wasn't just for show. Chilled desserts served practical, symbolic, and medicinal purposes. During Nowruz, the Persian New Year, cool sweets were offered as a symbol of renewal. During summer festivals, they were served to honor Anahita, the water goddess. During weddings, they cooled the nerves of grooms and refreshed blushing brides. You drift farther into the scene. A nobleman enters, wearing enough gold embroidery to bankrupt a modest village. He accepts a dish of icy pistachio pudding with theatrical reverence. He raises it like a toast, nods toward the courtyard musicians, and takes a bite. Silence follows, then a soft sigh. Dessert diplomacy achieved. It's not all opulence. You spot a child sneaking behind a column with a small snowball. Yes, in the desert. He tucks it into a cloth, looks around for witnesses, and disappears with a grin that says, "I will definitely throw this at someone noble." And honestly, iconic. You think about how strange it is that ice became a status symbol. The more cold your dessert, the higher your social standing. Inscriptions suggest kings used snow as a demonstration of power, distributing chilled treats during public events like ancient opera. You get a sherbet, and you get a sherbet. The common folk? They made do with cool cellars and the occasional stolen snowball. And yet, here in this courtyard, the air buzzes with unity. Rich or poor, noble or mule sweater, everyone agrees. Cold dessert in a hot place is the universe's most polite form of contradiction. You recline against a low cushion, spoon poised delicately above your bowl. It's beginning to melt just slightly. A bead of syrup slides down the side like a sleepy river. You take another bite, It tastes like the color gold would sound if gold were served in slush form, which apparently it is. You're not entirely sure how you got here, but now you're walking through a city where the buildings seem to breathe. Long, slow exhales of cool air drifting out from shaded courtyards and down winding alleyways. Overhead, the midday sun blazes with its usual vengeance, but here in the heart of the old quarter, something is different, something whispering. Welcome to the world of wind catchers, the Bajirs, and their quiet, airy genius. You glance upward. A cluster of rectangular towers pierce the skyline like clay chimneys with delusions of grandeur. Each one is slightly different, some tall and thin, others squat and broad. They sit atop homes, baths, even yakhchāls, acting like the town's nervous system, circulating air with the poise of a temple priest passing incense. But it's not just about passive cooling. Bajirs were designed with one thing in mind: controlling the desert's wrath. Built to face prevailing winds, their openings scoop up air like giant sniffers. That air then cascades down internal channels, sometimes flowing over a pool of water or, if you're particularly lucky, an ice pit below, creating a makeshift refrigerator effect. Step inside one of the homes. It's modest from the outside. Dusty plaster, narrow entryway, the occasional embroidered curtain twitching in the breeze. But as soon as you cross the threshold, you feel it. That cool embrace. The sudden softness of the air. The Bajir above channels a light gust downward, diffusing it throughout the house like it's gently stirring tea. You feel your shoulders drop, your breath lengthen. The walls here are thick, insulated with straw, clay, and whatever ancient secrets the builders whispered to their bricks. A woman walks past, balancing a tray of covered bowls. Inside them, chilled lentil stew, pickled garlic in vinegar, and, you guessed it, another round of icy dessert. She smiles at you. Hot. Enough for you? She seems to ask with her eyes. You reply with a nod that says, I would legally marry that windcatcher if allowed. Historians still argue whether Bajirs evolved solely in Yazd or spread via trade from Basra or even Egypt. Some say the earliest prototypes date back to 1300 BCE, though the first widespread usage seems to land around the 9th century CE. Either way, by the time you're wandering this city, they've become an architectural signature. The best wind catchers were designed not just to cool, but to impress. Some had 4 directional vents catching breezes from any compass point like desert DJs remixing airflow. Others were linked to underground canals, qanats, that brought cold water up from the mountains. The airflow, passing over the water, turned the home into a literal swamp cooler, minus the electricity bill and the mildew. You stroll through a bathhouse next. The walls are tiled in blue and white, echoing water patterns. But instead of steam, there's a delicate chill in the air. The Bajirs here work double time, venting hot air from the bath's furnace, while also pulling cool air from shaded reservoirs. In the changing room, someone has left behind a small clay jug of ice water. Condensation beads on the surface, as inviting as a nap in winter sheets. A young apprentice passes you carrying a toolkit, chisels, brushes, some kind of compass shaped like a bird. He's here to inspect the ducts. Maintenance is key in this ecosystem. One blocked vent, and the whole house sweats like a nervous diplomat. You follow him for a moment, watching as he adjusts a wooden panel to redirect airflow through another chamber. Within minutes, the temperature shifts, barely, but enough for a sigh to escape your lips. Some Bajirs even worked in reverse. When no wind was present, hot air inside would rise through the tower and escape, creating a vacuum that pulled cooler air in from below. It's like the building's lungs knew when to inhale and when to exhale. You sit in a corner alcove, watching. Sunlight filter through a lattice screen. Outside, life continues in slow motion. Traders haggling over cloth, a child chasing a rolling pomegranate, a dog that looks like it's made of dust and grumbles. But in here, the air feels untouched, preserved, like a whisper held between ancient fingers. And above you, The wind catcher continues its silent work. You can almost hear it murmur, "Don't worry, I've got you." You're back on your feet, gently ambling through a shaded passage in a wealthy quarter of the city. Your guide, a man whose sandals appear to be older than some dynasties, gestures for you to slow down. Ahead is the governor's residence, a sprawling garden complex where fountains whisper like gossips and chilled desserts have diplomatic power. Tonight, the elite of the Achaemenid court are hosting a banquet, not for conquest, not for marriage, but for the sweet, subtle art of peacekeeping. That's right. This isn't just dinner. This is frozen diplomacy. You step through a grand archway into a moonlit courtyard framed by cypress trees. Lanterns flicker under silken awnings, and water channels curve elegantly beneath the dining couches. The air smells like sandalwood, jasmine, and ambition. As you approach the low table, someone places a bowl of semi-frozen grape must and honey in front of you. It's topped with toasted barley flakes, a peculiar mix, and somehow it works. Seated nearby are delegates from different regions, Media, Bactria, Lydia, each dressed in their empire's finest. There's polite nodding, slow blinking, and what seems to be a competitive dessert appreciation happening in real time. One diplomat delicately raises a spoon of saffron ice and lets it dissolve on his tongue before exhaling with theatrical satisfaction. Another counters with a comment about the almond rice frozen blend back in his homeland. Dessert one-upmanship. The oldest game. A server passes by with a tray of crushed ice wrapped in fig leaves, drizzled in honey and rose water. You take one. It's cool enough to make your teeth hum. And yes, that's a good thing. You overhear whispers about a border dispute near the Caspian Sea. The two parties involved, seated right here, sipping chilled plum syrup and pretending to care more about dessert than land rights. And you know what? It might actually be working. Because in the world of Persian diplomacy, a frozen treat in a brutal climate says more than 100 scrolls of royal decree. It says, look what we can offer. Even here. Even now. Historians still argue whether ice-based desserts were formal parts of negotiation ceremonies or just elegant distractions. Some suggest specific treaties were signed over sherbet. Others roll their eyes and say the dessert was coincidental. But really? Have you ever seen two people angrily argue with saffron ice melting between them? The musicians begin to play, a soft drone of string and flute that sounds like water remembering its time as snow. You recline beside a general with impressive arm jewelry and very specific opinions about pistachios. He tells you how Persian kings used to send snow caravans as gifts to distant allies. Not letters, not gold, but ice. Wrapped in straw, carried on camelback, and offered like a crystal relic. Imagine receiving snow in Babylon, he says, swirling the last of his cherry sherbet. That's not just luxury, that's a message. And what a message it was. Snow as hospitality, cold as comfort. Frozen delight as a way of saying, join us, and your summers won't feel like curses. It was subtle empire building, one spoonful at a time. A gentle breeze nudges through the courtyard, rustling the tapestries and stirring the mint sprigs in your drink. Around you, voices lower, laughter bubbles up. Even the guards relax, leaning, slightly against their spears. This isn't just cooling down the air, it's cooling down the politics. You dip your spoon again. It's a new flavor, maybe peach and basil. Whatever it is, it tastes like forgiveness. You smile, recline further, and wonder, if more summits were conducted with ice cream, would history have fewer battles and more brain freezes? Probably. You drift out of the banquet under the indigo sky, your steps muffled by the sand-dusted stone. Behind you, the soft clinking of dessert bowls and murmurs of diplomacy fade into the warm night. But not all ice stays in place. Tonight, you're joining another procession, a caravan of sorts. Not traders with gold or warriors with spears, but men with melting cargo and very serious expressions. It's time to meet the cold couriers of the Persian deserts. Ahead, a small group readies for departure under a moon the color of cold butter. They wrap canvas bundles tightly with rope, nestling each into straw-packed crates. The crates are then strapped onto donkeys, some sullen, others resigned, all apparently familiar with the job. You walk beside them, joining the ranks of history's least likely postal service, the ice caravan. This route isn't for the faint of hoof. It stretches from the slopes of Elburz to the yakhchāls of desert cities like Yazd or Kerman. That's over 100 kilometers of blistering terrain, no umbrellas, no roadside lemonade. Just grit, wind, and the constant worry that your cargo is rapidly turning into a very expensive puddle. The journey begins in silence, except for the soft crunch of sandals and hooves over gravel. You imagine the lead mule setting the tone. Steady, grumpy, maybe humming an internal soundtrack of slow marches and passive-aggressive snorts. Each block of ice is wrapped in straw, cloth, and hope. Every stop is a calculation. Too long and you lose a day's wages in melt. Too short and the animals collapse from heat. They travel mostly by night, using starlight and memory to navigate. By day, they shelter in rock outcrops or caravanserais, those ancient roadside inns that smell like smoke, camel hair, and ancient arguments about who forgot to pack the pine resin. Historians still argue whether the ice caravans operated under royal command or private contract. Some suggest they were funded by the crown to ensure elite cities remained cool. Others believe these were entrepreneurial endeavors, early startups, if you will, with ice blocks sold to the highest bidder in the bazaar. One scratched tablet even suggests an ice futures market, where nobles gambled on the arrival of specific deliveries. You reach one such caravanserai as dawn begins to pinken the sky. It's a squat stone complex, half buried in sand. Inside, the caravan unpacks and checks the bundles. Some are still firm, crisp edges, solid weight. Others, not so much. One trader lifts a sack dripping steadily from the bottom and lets out a sigh usually reserved for spoiled milk or minor poetry readings. In one corner, a ledger is unrolled. Ice volume, departure time, melt estimates, all carefully recorded in ink made from pomegranate rind and soot. There's even a little drawing of a donkey wearing what appears to be a sun hat. You choose not to ask. A young boy darts past with a bowl of something cold, probably his reward for helping refill the straw packing. He winks at you. "Best job in the Empire," he says, licking syrup from his thumb. Cold hands, sweet mouth. A saying you're probably going to borrow. And it's true. Despite the heat, despite the odds, this ancient delivery system worked. Blocks of ice made it to their destinations, chilling food, medicine, tempers, and the occasional philosophical debate. Even now, centuries later, echoes of these cold couriers live on in the quiet efficiency of modern logistics. You can almost hear the whispers. Your frozen yogurt has shipped. Estimated delivery, 2-3 business dynasties. The sun finally breaches the horizon, gold and relentless. The caravan loads up again, lighter now but still determined. You walk with them a bit longer until the last yakhchāl rises in the distance, like a sandy mirage. Your journey ends there. Theirs does not. But before you part ways, someone hands you a small bundle wrapped in cloth. You unwrap it to find a sliver of ice, barely holding its form, flavored with sour cherry and basil seeds. You take a bite. It tastes like motion, like sacrifice, like dessert on the edge of evaporation. You arrive at Yazd just as the city yawns into morning. The desert sun is already peeking over the ochre skyline, but here in the alleys, narrow, walled, whisper quiet, it's still cool. You pass children with linen bags and old men holding, their hands behind their backs like philosophers. And there, rising like a half-buried starship in the middle of this ancient city, stands one of the last great yakhchāls, This one's different. Not a ruin, not abandoned. It's alive. The yakhchāl of Yazd stands over 20 meters tall. Its conical dome still intact, still shivering slightly under the pressure of its icy duties. It hasn't just survived the centuries, it's still being used. Though not on the same scale, not for war effort snowbanks or empire-wide dessert deliveries. This one stores ceremonial ice, used for festivals, holy days, and curious guests like you shuffle closer. There's a line of schoolchildren outside, giggling and poking each other while holding paper fans shaped like tiny yakhchāls. A teacher hushes them, then starts to explain the structure's design. You linger at the back, eavesdropping like the polite little ghost of a history podcast. Inside, the temperature plunges like a sigh of relief. Thick walls, 2 meters in places, hug the cold in tight. You spot a small plaque near the entrance, its Persian calligraphy translating loosely to coldness within, stillness without. A motto you wish applied to your inbox. You run your hand along the inside wall. It's damp, smooth in places, pocked in others. The air is dense, and in the far corner you see the pit, a basin still shaded and packed with pale blocks of ice. A woman wearing a scarf and long robe crouches beside it, ladling snow into a small wooden bucket. She's part of the preservation team, you learn. Local volunteers who've taken it upon themselves to keep the old systems alive. She offers you a scoop of ice mixed with crushed, dried orange peel and date syrup. You take it, heart already softening. It's tart, earthy, with just enough sweetness to make you blink slowly. It tastes like a winter that's trying to remember it's in the desert. Historians still argue whether Yazid's yakhchāls ever went out of use completely, or if there's been some quiet, continuous line of maintenance since antiquity. Some claim the practice was revived in the 20th century during water crises. Others say local families just never stopped using them. Either way, the tradition breathes on. You walk deeper into the structure, past a series of low clay shelves and narrow stairways. Here, things aren't just preserved, they're layered. Old tools hang on hooks, a straw broom, a chipped ice chisel, a copper bowl that looks like it could double as a crown. The walls are marked with handprints, some preserved from rituals, where people made offerings of cold water during droughts. In one small alcove, you find a journal, not ancient, early 1900s by the look of it. The script is Persian, but the language is universal. Notes about ice deliveries, names of seasonal workers, and even a sketched diagram of straw packing that looks suspiciously like a sushi roll. There's a child's drawing tucked into the last page, a smiling dome, tiny legs, and a spoon. Outside, Yazd begins to hum. The city has changed. Motorbikes, electric fans, neon signs, but somehow it hasn't lost its hush. Not completely. You pass a bakery with a wind catcher on top, its owner standing beside a rack of flatbread still steaming from the tan door. He offers you a piece, fresh, blistered, and shockingly good with your half-frozen date treat. Around the corner, you find a museum in what used to be a Qanat hub. The displays are simple. Water jugs, maps, cross-sections of wind towers. But in one glass case, lit softly by a side lamp, is a block of ice. Real, glistening, slightly cracked. The caption reads, "Harvested from the old basin, kept cold using traditional methods." And you? You stand there watching it slowly bead with condensation, knowing full well it's more than frozen water. It's memory, innovation, a lesson in patience, balance, and the audacity of staying cool in a burning world. You take one last bite of your treat and step into the sun, blinking but unbothered. Yazd will warm, but the yakhchāl behind you hums, with quiet defiance. The past isn't gone, it's just been chilling. You wander just a bit farther, pulled by the scent of spiced fruit and the low hum of string instruments. Night has fallen again, but this time it's not the silence of a sleeping city. It's the quiet rustle of anticipation. You've found yourself in the heart of a garden estate, where the nobility of Persia are gathering beneath the stars for one of their most treasured traditions, the moonlit banquet. The scene is absurdly lovely. Imagine if someone took your idea of a fancy picnic, multiplied it by 100, then added poetry and a dessert buffet that could convert the sourest philosopher. Soft carpets unfurl over the cool stone courtyard. Lanterns flicker in the citrus trees. A servant glides past carrying a tray stacked with chilled pomegranate syrup jellies, each glistening like little rubies under moonlight. You settle onto a cushion near the edge, feet tucked beneath you, hands around a ceramic bowl. It's filled with bastani sonnati, Persian ice cream made from frozen milk, rose water, and ground orchid root. It's chewy, floral, and just shy of magical. A little like if vanilla pudding decided to study the violin. The musicians play a sitar, melody so delicate it feels like it's tiptoeing across your shoulders. A poet begins to recite verses from Hafez. You don't catch every word, but the rhythm lulls you, flowing like cold honey in a hot cup. Beside you, a noble woman whispers a joke about her husband's addiction to chilled carrot pudding. You laugh softly, careful not to spill your sorbet, and then comes the centerpiece, a dessert tableau arranged around a massive slab of ice, clear, towering, and gently steaming. On it rest dozens of small dishes kept cool by proximity. You spot saffron and pistachio creams, yogurt frozen with crushed lavender, even slices of melon marinated in snowmelt and mint. This is Persian fine dining, but chilled. Historians still argue whether these moonlit banquets were primarily political, romantic, or spiritual. Some believe they honored Anahita, goddess of water and fertility. Others say they were just excuses for the elite to flaunt their access to the kingdom's rarest resource, coolness. One fragmentary poem simply reads, "We sat in the dark, and the moon tasted like rose." Whatever the reason, they remain legendary. The stars seem to lean in closer as you sample a pear sorbet that might just have changed the course of empires. Across from you, a prince tips his bowl at a scholar, and a low debate begins, about poetry, of course, but also about whether faluda should be served with lime or sour cherry. It gets heated. Ironically, you dip into another bowl, this one filled with cucumber, crushed snow, and the lightest splash of grape vinegar. It sounds strange. It tastes divine, like summer's shadow. You understand now how ice could be more than refreshment. It's theater. It's philosophy. It's the ability to stand in the desert and say, "We can make it snow whenever we feel like it." One of the musicians breaks into a playful tune. A child dances awkwardly between the tables, holding a bowl of frozen mulberry cream like it's a treasure. An elder taps the beat with his cane. You lean back, feeling full, cool, and content in a way that doesn't often happen in this world of sand and sun. Someone passes you a final cup, an herbal sorbet made from mint, tarragon, and something sharp you can't quite place. You take a slow sip. It's bracing, like a desert breeze at dawn, and above, the moon glows white and full, as if reflecting the chill of every ice block stacked carefully into every yakhchāl across the empire. It watches over the banquet. It approves. You feel the cushion cradle you, the music murmur against your skin, the last spoonful dissolve like starlight on your tongue. And for a moment, just a moment, you think, yes, this is what coolness was. Always meant to be. Not just temperature, but elegance in resistance. You wake, or rather float, into morning on the move again, the banquet's dreamy chill still lingering like sugar on your breath. This time, you're not walking. You're part of a caravan. Yes, another one. But not for ice from the mountains. This one's carrying frozen treats to distant outposts. Welcome to the ancient Persian version of an express delivery service. If every package was melting just a little faster than anyone wanted to admit, the caravan is nothing grand. 3 camels, 6 donkeys, and a handful of handlers who look like they've seen every bad shortcut in the empire. But strapped across, the animals' backs are insulated crates, wooden boxes lined with straw, charcoal, and strips of thick wool. Inside them, ice blocks and frozen sherbet, bound for the governor of a smaller desert city who, rumor has it, refuses to sign tax edicts unless his midday pistachio mint slush is precisely the right temperature. As you ride alongside the caravan, a donkey lets out a sound that could mean good morning or I regret all my life choices. Either feels fair. The road ahead ripples with heat. The team moves in silence, eyes scanning the horizon for signs of shelter, or worse, bandits, who wouldn't hesitate to loot the Empire's most ridiculous cargo. You stop for a brief break near a rocky outcrop. The handlers unpack one of the crates, checking the cargo. There it is, a small terracotta pot wrapped in oiled cloth, resting on a layer of chipped ice. They unwrap it slowly, like priests revealing a relic. Inside, a pale yellow sorbet, scented, with quince and saffron, glistens like treasure. One of the men spoons out a tiny bite, not for indulgence, but for quality control. He nods solemnly. The sorbet lives. Historians still argue how far frozen goods could really be transported in ancient Persia. Some say only within a day's journey. Others suggest elaborate relay systems, where one team passed the cargo to the next, like a sweaty, frostbitten Olympic torch. What's undeniable is the effort. For many cities, receiving chilled treats from the capital wasn't just luxury, it was political theater. You pass a small village where children wave, some shouting, "Ice! Ice!" as if the caravan were a celebrity. A girl runs up and offers a clay cup of warm goat's milk in trade for a handful of slush. The handlers chuckle, but decline. This ice isn't just valuable. It's counted, measured, protected, and the dangers are real. You cross a salt flat where the air feels like it's trying to cook your teeth. One crate begins to leak. A small pool forms beneath a donkey's flank. The handler curses softly and redirects the animal toward shade. You help patch the bundle with spare cloth and a prayer. As dusk falls, you arrive at a walled city shimmering in the last gold light. The guards at the gate recognize the seal on the crates and wave the group through without question. You're met by a steward in an elaborate robe who sniffs dramatically at the cargo, then bows. The governor is napping, he says, but his sherbet will be chilled. You watch the final crate disappear into the palace kitchens. There's a brief silence, then a distant clatter of bowls. The air smells like mint and mango. Mission accomplished. Back at the caravanserai, the handlers sit cross-legged on mats, sipping warm tea and recounting past deliveries. The time a crate fell into a river, the noble who refused to eat any dessert not cooled by mountain moonlight. The one disaster involving melted grape syrup and a swarm of very ambitious bees. You recline, eyes heavy, listening to the tales and the crackling of a small fire. The stars blink awake overhead, and you realize there's something noble in carrying perishable pleasure across unforgiving land. In refusing to let joy melt without a fight, you fall asleep beside a donkey who snores like a bagpipe. The night is cool. The crates are empty. But your heart is full of frost and sugar. Morning creeps into the caravanserai with the gentlest light, sifting through the gaps in the thatched roof like flour through a sieve. You wake slowly, your spine making the usual complaints, your dreams still sticky with saffron and donkey, braying. But today's tale isn't about travel. It's about numbers, power, and snow as capital. You step into the courtyard just as a robed scribe unrolls a ledger on a flat stone table. He looks unimpressed by your existence, but deeply invested. In column width, this man doesn't carry ice. He tracks it. Welcome to the frosty underworld of the Persian ice economy. You peer over his shoulder. The scroll is filled with neat lines of Aramaic script. Names, weights, quantities. One line reads, 10 blocks, harvested at third moon, to be divided. By household. Penalty for hoarding, forfeiture of rights to summer melon ration. Beneath that, 2 bundles reserved for temple use. Ice wasn't just a treat. It was taxed, traded, assigned value like wheat or silver. The scribe sighs and continues dipping his reed pen in a walnut ink pot. You ask, with your eyes, how this works. He gestures you over and gives you a crash course in the cold economy. Each winter, officials recorded the amount of snow and ice collected into regional yakhchāls. The size and weight of each block was estimated using a rudimentary measuring rod, often carved with notches and the occasional doodle. These frost logs formed the basis of summer distributions. Rich households paid a tax not in coin but in ice rights, often by providing labor, straw for insulation, or transport animals. Poorer families received smaller rations but could buy additional scoops at the local bazaar. Special permits were issued for temple use, weddings, medical emergencies, or especially whiny governors. And yes, there were snow taxes, especially in years when frost was scarce. If your village had access to a steady source of winter ice but failed to share with the district yakhchāl, you were levied, harshly. One record even mentions a town fined 3 goats and a camel for hiding extra snow under prayer rugs. Bold move. Historians still argue about the scale of this icy bureaucracy. Some believe only major cities kept formal ledgers. Others insist even small towns had frost officials. A role possibly passed from father to son with solemn fanfare and possibly a fancy hat. You're handed one of the ancient tokens once used to track delivery. A smooth clay disc stamped with a snowflake pattern and the sigil of a local noble house. These were exchanged like currency. 1 token equals 1 scoop. Lose it? Sorry, no sorbet for you. Later that day, you stroll through a bustling market. One stall, shaded with dyed silk, displays glass jars of preserved rosewater and tiny clay, pots packed with soft, scented ice cream. The vendor smiles. Government ice, she says proudly. First press. Good year. You wonder if anyone's ever aged sorbet like wine. Near the stall, a child hands over a small wooden stick in exchange for a chilled barley drink. The stick is inscribed with tally marks, his family's account with the ice vendor. You watch. The boy sips slowly, reverently, the way most children inhale cartoons. In the evening, you pass a gathering of merchants, traders discussing the cost of hiring extra ice couriers. One man complains about the rising price of straw insulation. Another brags that his cousin invented a better wrapping method using papyrus and sheep's wool. It's like listening to very early venture capitalists arguing over refrigerated logistics. You recline beside a fountain fed by a qanat, water burbling up from the earth like a low, wet lullaby. A teenager sits nearby, chiseling ice into shapes. A lion, a sun, a little frozen elephant that promptly topples over and is eaten by his younger brother. Ice wasn't just cold. It was currency. It was measured, monitored, hoarded, and envied. It was what separated the merely warm from the comfortably chill. And as you stretch, letting the sounds of bartering and the scent of sweetened ice float around you, you realize, even in a desert empire, the economy could be cool, literally. You're back under the stars again, this time on a rooftop. Flat, sun-baked, probably still radiating heat from the day, but manageable now. You're lying beside a man who insists he's a poet, but you're pretty sure he's just here for the dessert. Tonight's flavor? Melon ice with jasmine syrup. It tastes like a polite ghost is gently rearranging your taste buds. He's telling you a story about a dessert that cured heartbreak, or maybe a snow cone that turned a battle. His details are fuzzy and delicious. This is the realm of the half-true, the debated, the whispered. Tonight, we step into the curious melting point where myth and fact blur like hot ink on a cold scroll. Tonight, we dive into the legends of Persian frozen treats, Or, as historians might label it, things we're 67% sure might have happened. Take, for instance, the legend of the apricot sorbet, so good it made a vizier cry. Allegedly prepared with snow from a sacred peak, syrup made from wild apricots picked only at dawn, and a spoon carved from almond wood. The vizier took one bite, burst into tears, and immediately forgave the tax cheats of 3 villages. It's recorded somewhere. Maybe. Probably on a napkin. Historians still argue whether this dessert ever existed. Some say it was metaphor, a literary flourish in a poem about mercy. Others believe it was real, passed down in family recipes until someone lost the original proportions and accidentally created apricot cement. Then there's the tale of the queen who refused to marry until her suitor brought her ice that hadn't melted under sunlight. He supposedly constructed an underground relay of cold chambers from the mountains to the palace courtyard. By the time the ice arrived, he was dehydrated, delirious, and wearing 2 left sandals. But the snowball was still firm. She accepted. The wedding feast? You guessed it. Chilled pistachio rosewater pudding for all. Archaeologists found a set of sandals matching that description. But also, they might have been from a market spill or a bored teenager's prank. Who can say? Even the beloved Faluda has its mysteries. Some records claim it came from northern provinces, where sorghum and starch were abundant. Others suggest its noodle-like texture was a direct nod to Chinese influences via the Silk Roads. One scholar insists the earliest versions didn't use rice or cornstarch at all, but rather the pulp of a seaweed now extinct. It's the kind of debate that keeps food historians and cranky uncles up at night. You shift on the rooftop, staring up at a sky smeared with stars and moonlight. Your poet friend is now arguing with himself. Was the snow-chilled yogurt of the Yai? Western Hills a real recipe or a metaphor for cold wisdom? You suggest it can be both. He nods, deeply satisfied, and takes another bite of his jasmine syrup ice. Elsewhere in the city, older women swap stories of wedding feasts where the groom had to serve his bride snow-scooped from a shrine. If it didn't melt by the time it reached her lips, the marriage would thrive. If it melted too quickly, well, that was a conversation with her mother. These legends aren't just entertainment. They're instruction manuals for a culture obsessed, beautifully, irrationally, ingeniously, with controlling the uncontrollable, heat, time, emotion, even mortality. What is dessert, really, if not a pause button on the day? You take one last bite. It's melting fast, but somehow that's the point. You've wandered into a village now, modest, sun-cracked, buzzing with a kind of slow, golden energy. Chickens peck at corners, a cat naps beside a clay jar, and just ahead, you hear the unmistakable sounds of shrieking laughter. And was that a snowball? You round a corner and find yourself smack in the middle of a midsummer miracle. Kids having a snowball fight. In Persia, in the desert, in July. It shouldn't be possible. But then again, you've been wandering among yakhchāls for days now. Nothing about this feels out of place anymore. The children, barefoot, sun-darkened, filled with chaos, are launching clumps of packed snow at each other with the uncontainable joy of small humans defeating the laws of thermodynamics. Their snow comes from a shallow pit behind a home, shaded by reeds and mulberry trees. Inside, a small cache of leftover ice from winter has been preserved in layers of straw and ash. It's damp, a little sad-looking, but it's cold, and that's enough. A grandmother watches from her doorway, sipping a glass of dough, chilled yogurt drink with mint, while pretending not to smile every time a snowball whizzes past her wall. She gestures for you to sit. You do, and she hands you a small bowl filled with something odd. Slices of mango, lightly frozen, half buried in crushed basil leaves and lemon zest. This was my grandmother's trick, she says, in a voice like sandpaper and lullabies. She'd bury fruits in snow, then serve them on the hottest day of summer. Thought it kept the children obedient. or at least quiet. You eat. It's sharp, sweet, impossibly refreshing. You close your eyes. If childhood had a flavor, it might be this. Nearby, two older boys have turned their attention to cooling off pottery. They're coating jugs with damp cloth and rubbing them with frost. Not exactly high-tech, but effective. Another child presses a snowball to his forehead and sighs dramatically, as if performing for the gods. Historians still argue how widespread these casual domestic uses of preserved snow were. Some believe only wealthier families had the resources to bury ice and fruits beneath their homes. Others think every village had at least one enterprising elder who knew how to squirrel away winter in a pit. A few speculate that entire community festivals centered around opening the summer snow reserves, part survival, part performance art. You ask the grandmother how long they can make the snow last. She shrugs. Depends on the year. Depends on the mice. Depends on the kids getting too curious too early. You laugh with her. Around the village, other families begin emerging from their homes, drawn by the racket. One woman brings out a tray of frozen pomegranate slices dusted with salt and sumac. A boy trades a snowball for a frozen date, biting into it with the solemnity of a priest receiving communion. And just for a moment, this dusty village doesn't feel like part of the desert. It feels like a secret island of chill, a bubble of resistance against the sun's dictatorship. A place where children learn not just how to play, but how to preserve something fleeting. One girl sneaks up behind you and presses a tiny snowball to the back of your neck. You yelp like a startled goat. She runs off laughing, victorious. The grandmother raises an eyebrow and hands you another bowl, this one with ice, melon, and just a hint of vinegar. You accept it like a medal. The snow will melt, the fruits will soften. The laughter will fade with the sun. But tonight you've witnessed something rare. Joy engineered from nothing but patience, ingenuity, and a stubborn refusal to sweat. You meander out of the village just as the horizon begins to simmer again, that early warning shimmer that says you've got maybe 2 hours before your sandals start melting. But your path curves toward a low stone compound, a kind of half-hidden oasis of calm. This isn't a market, not a shrine. It's a kitchen, or maybe more than that. It's a place where women have been working with cold for centuries, quietly, expertly, and without much credit. The door creaks open to reveal a courtyard shaded by grapevines and blooming jasmine. A clay basin sits in the center, its surface faintly steaming. Around it, 3 women bustle. One kneads dough beside an open fire, another ladles chilled yogurt into shallow bowls, and the third carefully shaves ice into a copper dish using what looks like a dulled sickle. You step in with that awkward, "Hi, I don't want to interrupt your ancient magic" expression. The youngest of the 3 glances up, wipes her hands on her apron, and offers you a sliver of ice crusted with dried lime and rose petals. You accept like it's a sacrament. It is. This is one of the preservation kitchens, an unofficial term, really, but it fits. Families here, especially women, have long been the keepers of traditional ice handling skills, not just for fancy desserts, but for medicines, rituals, weddings, even funeral rites. Where others saw ice as wealth or logistics, they saw it as continuity. They invite you to sit beneath a fig tree and watch. One woman mixes cooled barley water with mint extract, her movements precise. Another layers fruit in a clay jar that's been chilled overnight. Plum, peach, and something musky you can't name. She packs the layers with crushed ice and murmurs a verse under her breath. You don't ask what it means. It doesn't matter. The ritual speaks for itself. Historians still argue about the role women played in Persian refrigeration practices. Texts are frustratingly vague, often crediting male engineers and laborers, while the women, who prepared, preserved, administered, and served cold food and medicines, are barely mentioned. But oral traditions say otherwise. Grandmothers tell stories of their mothers carving ice with bone tools, of girls learning how to test snow purity by scent alone. One record from the conjure period notes that women in some regions ran entire neighborhood yakhchāl cooperatives, collecting, storing, and rationing ice for dozens of families. Their work was rarely written down, but it was always remembered, passed hand to hand like the first spoonful of chilled sorbet. A girl, maybe 10 years old, kneels beside you. She offers a wooden spoon coated in thick, icy yogurt, drizzled with saffron. "My mother made this," she says proudly. You nod, tasting it, creamy, tart, and strangely electric, like a sunset in dairy form. The oldest woman motions you over to a corner alcove where medicinal herbs dry in bundles. Here she keeps small snow pockets, ice wrapped in stitched cotton, stored in sealed pots. They're used for treating fevers, swelling, and in some cases, grief. A widow might be given snow-scented balm to cool her chest. A sick child might have his feet bathed in meltwater mixed with rue and vinegar. Ice was medicine, too. Outside, the sun begins its climb. But in here, the kitchen stays cool, not just from the snow, but from the quiet pulse of memory, precision, and care. No one raises their voice, no one wastes a gesture. Every scoop, every spoonful is measured, not just by weight, but by memory. You're offered one last bite. Fig, preserved lemon, and a splash of grape mussed on crushed ice. It tastes like something your ancestors might have dreamed. As you leave, the youngest girl gives you a wink and a snowball pressed in a linen pouch. "In case the sun's rude later," she says, and then she returns to her slicing, her hands sure, her motions silent. The world may record emperors and battles, but here the legacy is colder, sharper, and very much alive. You find yourself now on a dusty road sloping westward, the sun casting long, syrupy shadows behind you. The desert gives way to softer hills, the scent of salt teasing the air. You're walking not toward a yakhchāl, but away from one, toward its distant cousins in faraway lands. Because tonight the breeze carries with it echoes of influence. Tonight you trace the frost-bitten footprints from Persia to Paris. Your first stop is Antioch, a city once perched between empires, forever. Inhaling other people's ideas and exhaling something slightly more fabulous. As early as the 1st century CE, local elites dabbled in snow-chilled wine and fruit preserves. Some say it was Roman affectation. Others suspect Persian imports. Either way, the idea of cooling your drink with mountain snow spread like a rumor, with good posture. From there, the trail winds to Damascus, then Baghdad. The Abbasids, lovers of comfort and poetry, took the Persian cold chain and turned it into a form of spiritual hygiene. Libraries had chill rooms. Caliphs demanded snow. Deliveries to keep their moods manageable. In time, they refined faluda into sharbot, added new fruits, and passed it along with their love of algebra and extremely passive-aggressive poetry. And then, Sicily. Thanks to Arab rule in the 9th century, the snow trade arrived in Europe, proper. Sicilian monks began harvesting Etna's snow. They built rudimentary ice pits, and before long, Europe's first sorbets were being spooned delicately in sunlit cloisters. You pause under an olive tree in southern Italy, where a faded plaque marks the site of an old niviere, an ice storehouse. It's half collapsed, half forgotten. But beneath the stones, a soft coolness still lingers. You swear you smell mint. Historians still argue how much credit Persia deserves. Was it the origin point, or just one of many early ice innovators? Some claim the Chinese had iced tea long before Persia had rosewater slush. Others point to the Greeks and their snow and honey desserts. But here's the thing. Persia didn't just use ice. It revered it, ritualized it, made it an art form, and art travels. You now arrive in Renaissance Venice, where sorbetto becomes fashionable among nobles trying to pretend they've never sweated. Recipes pass hand to hand, and suddenly everyone's freezing wine, cream, and even chicken broth. Yes, that was a phase. The Medici family's obsession with chilled lemon concoctions becomes the stuff of social legend. By the 17th century, Paris gets its cold teeth into things. Catherine de' Medici brings frozen desserts to the French court like she's smuggling magic. The French refine the Persian idea into something smoother, richer, and outrageously smug. Sorbets, granitas, eventually ice cream. You sit now in a salon in 18th century France, gold leaf on the walls, someone reading Rousseau in the corner, and there, center table, a chilled orange blossom custard, spoon resting like a crown. You take a bite. It's decadent, yes, but familiar. The saffron, the floral notes, the trace lineage back to a Persian snow pit and a camel's careful footsteps. Even as ice becomes mechanized, the old methods survive. In the late 1800s, explorers in Iran report still seeing yakhchāls in use, still admired for their efficiency and eerie elegance. Meanwhile, architects in modern Dubai and Egypt begin studying ancient Persian cooling systems for eco-friendly designs. The bajirs inspire passive cooling towers. The qanats spark conversations about water conservation. Back in Yazd, a local university opens a lab next to a restored yakhchāl. They're testing traditional insulation materials for modern freezers. One student carries a clipboard. Another carries a bowl of ice cream. Some things never change. And so, you've walked the long road, from frozen apricots to pistachio parfaits, from camelback deliveries to champagne sorbets. You've tasted time itself, chilled. You pause now under another tree, this one outside a Persian restaurant in London. On the menu, saffron rosewater gelato made in-house. You order it, naturally. You're somewhere quieter now, deeper in time's quieter alleyway. No caravans, no nobles, no rooftop banquets. Just a low-walled building, part shrine, part clinic, part science fair for people who think mint and snow can cure just about anything. Tonight we find ourselves at the intersection of medicine and refrigeration. The air here is thick with something sharp and earthy, myrrh maybe, or dried thyme steeped in goat milk. This isn't a place for show. It's a place for healing. You're in the courtyard of a Persian bimaristan, an ancient hospital, and one of the first things you notice is the coolness. Not spiritual, not poetic, literal. Snow blocks, packed in straw and stacked under an awning, rest beside ceramic jars filled with syrups, oils, and vinegars. They're not for drinking, they're for survival. A physician glides past, robes rustling like well-informed whispers. He gestures for you to sit beside a low cot, where a boy lies, feverish and twitching. The doctor unwraps a parcel of snow and, with practiced hands, presses it into a cloth soaked in rose vinegar. He lays it across the boy's forehead, murmuring, softly. Welcome to Ancient Emergency Medicine, the Ice Pack Edition. Historians still argue how widespread this practice was. Some believe only the major cities had consistent access to enough snow for medicinal use. Others argue even village healers found ways to preserve ice, storing it in clay pots lined with straw in their cellars. Either way, the logic was clear. Heat causes illness. Cold soothes it. In the land of fire, snow was medicine. You watch a nurse, or perhaps a highly competent herbalist, titles are fluid here, grind dried fig into powder and stir it into a bowl of meltwater. It's meant to settle the stomach, especially during heat stroke. Another bowl sits nearby, filled with chilled syrup infused with camphor, meant to lower body temperature when all else fails. And then there's the spiritual side. Some believed snow had a purifying essence. It was gathered from holy mountains, never touched by hand, and kept in sealed vessels marked with protection prayers. This snow would only be used in the direst cases: delirium, convulsions, soul sickness. You notice now a section of the courtyard shaded by a large canvas canopy. Beneath it, several patients lie on mats, wrapped lightly in damp linens. Between them, shallow clay bowls filled with snow and salt water cool the air. It's a rudimentary climate control system, and it works. The space feels 10 degrees cooler. Then the street outside. You're handed a cup of something bitter, pomegranate bark tea, cooled with snow slush. Not exactly refreshing, but strangely effective. Your temples relax, your lungs loosen. One physician records the day's treatments in a leather-bound scroll. Alongside notes on pulse rhythms and stool color, you're thankful he keeps that part vague. He adds a small symbol, a snowflake. It means the patient was given ice therapy. Apparently, there's a whole lexicon of ice use here. Diagonal strokes for compresses, circles for ingestion, stars for ritual snow application. You follow? Another nurse down a short hallway into a darker chamber. This one's lined with jars, dried herbs, powders, preserved roots, and at the center, a low bench built from stone surrounded by a gutter. It's an operating table. Primitive, yes, but brilliant in its design. The gutter for ice. Chipped. Ice would be packed around the patient to reduce swelling and, likely, for very early anesthesia attempts. One document from the Sasanian period describes a sleeping frost bath, a mix of snow and crushed poppy applied to the limbs during surgery. Pain management was a crude art, but they tried. And it all started with ice. Back in the courtyard, the boy's fever breaks. His mother weeps, gripping the physician's wrist, thanking him. He doesn't speak, just presses another bundle of snow to the boy's chest and waits. You step away, stunned not by the technology, though that's impressive, but by the care, the persistence, the idea that even in a place that baked in the sun, they found ways to keep people cool, inside and out. You walk past the snow piles again, smaller now, always melting, always in use, just like knowledge. You walk on, deeper into silence now. The air feels different, not cooler, but heavier, as if the land itself is remembering. You're in a place where echoes settle like dust. The sky above is gray with morning haze, and in front of you stands a yakhchāl. But this one is quiet. Still. Not the hum of ice moving or voices calling out quantities, just wind. This is the story of what happens when cold goes quiet. The structure leans slightly, age slumping its spine. Cracks run along its outer dome like veins on an elder's hand. A few bricks have fallen, revealing the layers beneath: mud, lime, straw, camel hair. The recipe that once held back the desert has held for centuries, but not forever. You step inside. It's cooler than outside, but not cold. The pit has caved in partially, revealing packed sediment and bits of straw. A broken shovel rests on. The side, rusted and lost to time. This is a retired yakhchāl, its usefulness surrendered to invention. Refrigeration, that noisy upstart, came riding in with plugs and promises and forgot to bow to the mud domes that made it possible. This shift didn't happen overnight. By the 20th century, most Persian homes had access to imported ice, first in blocks from industrial factories, then later via electric freezers. The silence inside the yakhchāl wasn't just about abandonment, it was a gradual fading. Less snow harvested, fewer children sent to carry bundles, fewer rituals. Until one day, someone simply didn't refill the basin. Historians still argue when the last operational yakhchāl shut down. Some say the 1960s. Others insist a few in remote areas held on until the 80s. But in cities, the fall was faster. Progress tends to forget to say thank you. Outside, you see graffiti scratched into the wall, a date, maybe 1942, and a name that's mostly dust. Nearby, a faded sign in both Persian and French reads, "Cooling Dome, do not climb." Clearly. Ignored, judging by the sandals at the base. You sit in the shade and listen to the wind catcher above still trying to do its job, sending a faint, pitiful breeze down the shaft. It's a ghost now. A mechanical prayer wheel spinning for no one. Not all yakhchāls were allowed to die quietly. Some were dismantled, bricks sold off or repurposed. One became a goat shelter. Another was reportedly converted into a makeshift cinema, which feels almost poetic if it hadn't also involved drilling a hole in the roof. Others, like this one, were just left. Too old to be useful, too beautiful to destroy. So they linger, dotting the desert like forgotten punctuation marks, reminding the land that once people here could make ice with nothing but mud and geometry. You walk along the edge, tracing, your fingers against the wall. It feels warmer than before. The air is still dry, still honest. You close your eyes and imagine this dome bustling again, ice shavings, sandal prints, the smell of rose water and goat sweat, laughter, arguments over block weights, someone cursing a mule, and now, just you, and the sound of sand shifting. You. Stand, brush your hands clean, and give the yakhchāl a silent nod. It doesn't answer, but it doesn't need to. Its work is done, and it was good. You step away from the resting dome, blinking against the morning light. But not all stories of the yakhchāl end in ruin. Some rise again, reborn through glass, steel, and ambition. You're in the present now, trailing the shadows of architects, chefs, and dreamers who are reviving old cool with new tools. Ahead lies a construction site, but it's quiet. No jackhammers, no neon vests. Just a circular skeleton of clay bricks being laid by hand in a desert community that smells of fresh mortar and mint tea. The dome is unmistakable. Someone is rebuilding a yakhchāl. You're met by a group of university students in dusty tunics and modern sneakers. They're part of a climate adaptation project based out of Tehran, aiming to revive ancient Persian cooling technologies in response to modern energy demands. With global temperatures rising and electricity grids groaning, passive cooling isn't just charming, it's essential. One of the students, a woman with sun-chapped cheeks and blueprints tucked under one arm, walks you through the design. It's faithful to the original, same cone, same mud brick insulation, but with subtle upgrades. Underground water pipes, solar-powered air sensors, a capstone made of recycled glass. We call it a retro-future dome, she says. You nod, like you understand. Nearby, a chef in a pop-up kitchen stirs something sweet in a gleaming copper pot. He's reviving Persian desserts the old way. No freezer, no ice cream machine. Just a basin of hand-harvested snow, a block of ice chipped. From last winter, and a wooden churn he calls his grandmother's revenge. The result? Faluda, exactly as it might have tasted 500 years ago. You take a bite. The noodles dance. The syrup sings. The cold, yes, it still stuns. Historians still argue whether this revival is nostalgic vanity or practical genius. Some say the energy savings are negligible. Others argue the symbolism alone is priceless. A civilization adapting not by forgetting, but by remembering. You visit a new hotel in Yazd, designed entirely around wind catchers and thermal flow. No AC units, just centuries-old airflow math and generous use of shade. Guests sip snow-cooled sharbet beneath latticed archways and sleep soundly through 40 nights. Even in Tehran, rooftop cafes are experimenting with yakhchāl-inspired chillers, low-tech, cooling systems that use evaporation, shade, and a little theater to lower the temperature without burning a watt. You sit in one, sipping iced sour cherry syrup, while a jazz trio plays under string lights. A server passes with a menu titled Frozen Past. You wander through an exhibit at the National Museum of Iran, where an entire room is dedicated to traditional cooling tech. Yakhchāl models spin on Lazy Susans. Windcatcher cross-sections tower above touchscreen displays. One child asks her, "Mother, why didn't we just keep doing this?" The mother doesn't answer. She just looks at the dome model and smiles. Outside, a mural covers the museum's wall. It shows a modern skyline, dotted not with skyscrapers, but with elegant mud domes and wind catchers. In bold script, the future cools backward. You return to the desert one last time. The new yakhchāl is nearly finished now. The workers rest beneath it, drinking cold duck and laughing about something that probably involves donkeys. The dome is quiet, but not silent. It's ready. And you? You take a seat at its edge. The air feels a little cooler here. Not cold. Just enough. Just right. You settle in one last time beneath the dome of memory. It's late evening now, the desert casting long shadows across the cracked earth, and you're walking slower, thinking softer. All around you, the story lingers. Not in shouts or echoes, but in the way cool air still clings to shaded clay. You're not just in a place anymore. You're inside the aftertaste of 1,000 frozen bites, 1,000 melted hours. You walk past a boy lying on a woven mat, slurping the final spoonfuls of sour cherry faluda. His grandmother gently fans him with a palm frond paddle. Somewhere a wind catcher exhales. The world cools just a degree. Tonight, we're not talking about emperors or feasts or noble treaties disguised as sherbet. Tonight is about the small sweetnesses, the quiet ones. The bowl of snow offered to a sick child, the fruit chilled overnight in straw just so it surprises your tongue at breakfast, the cousin who always knew where the last scoop of ice was hiding. The moon rises, just a sliver now, like a fingernail painted in ice. And in that moonlight, you pass a crumbling yakhchāl that still stands, still breathing faintly. You touch its side. It's warm from the day, but still humming with purpose, as if saying, I remember. You close your eyes and picture it all. The men hauling ice down the mountains, the women pressing cold cloths to fevered brows, the children giggling as they bite into snow-stuffed mulberries. You see banquets, arguments, poetry, all orbiting the same silent center, cold in a place where it shouldn't be. Historians still argue what it all means. Whether the ancient Persians mastered refrigeration or just made peace with the sun. Whether snow was sacred or simply convenient. Whether any of this actually mattered in the grand sweep of conquest and collapse. But you know better. Because in a land ruled by heat, where thirst is a constant prayer and the sun wears crowns, to make cold was to make comfort. To control it was to whisper back to the world, we can choose when to melt. You take one last bite of memory. Ice, rose, saffron, sweet, cool, gone. And now, just let yourself slow. Feel the dome above you. Soft clay, silent, wrapped in stars. The desert has quieted to a hum, and the wind moves gently through the bajirs, brushing your cheeks like a mother's hand, checking for fever. No footsteps, no music, just the hush of cool air, the patient exhale of the earth remembering how to sleep. You're safe here. You've walked through centuries, tasted snow in the desert, touched the walls of forgotten freezers. You've watched old women press snow to brows, seen camels plod across salt plains with ice in their saddlebags. You've eaten under moonlight. You've listened to recipes that taste like poetry. Let it all drift now. Let the saffron soften. Let the rosewater fade into background sweetness. Let the last echoes of that wind catcher slide across your skin like a lullaby. Breathe in. You're cool, still, weightless. The yakhchāl stands in the distance, mud and straw and silence, its shadow long and soft, like a blanket being pulled over the world. It doesn't need to do anything else tonight. Neither do you. Rest now. You've earned it. Let the cold hold you. Let the stories melt into dreams. Good night, traveler. End of script. Sweet dreams.